Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain, and welcome to the DCOM review. Over the past month or two, we've talked about some of the best DCOMs ever made, films with subtle and clever nuance, ones with interesting cultural relevance, and even a surprisingly very good recent one regarding healthy emotional expression. Ah yes, we've had our fun discussing not just the design of these films, but the meaning, and so it only seems appropriate to now deviate from all of that and talk about one of the most meaningless movies of all time. If you're looking for subtlety, watch something else. If you're looking for sensible character dynamics, watch something else. And if you're looking for the purpose of frenemies, well, join the club. In case I wasn't overt enough, it's that time once again, guys. We're taking a look at a bad movie. But maybe, just maybe, through our signature closer look, we can uncover the potential nuances, character arcs, and Yeah, no, this is Frenemies. Now, for some reason, this movie is broken off into 3 separate stories loosely tied to the title of the movie. Now, you might be thinking, but Disney Brain, if they divided the movie into 3 parts, there must be some subtle significance in how the acts both diverge and coalesce. To which I respond, no. No, there is not. So the first story involves Science Whiz Jake Logan and his canine companion Murray. They're the best of friends, and also Murray is probably more intelligent than most humans given his actions, but in any case, that friendship is challenged when Stephanie Scott comes into the picture. You remember Stephanie, the annoying one from Ant Farm. Well, one of several annoying ones. She's playing Julianne, but also playing Jake, since she only wants to use his big brain to get an A. How innovative. To her credit, she does the smart thing by spraying perfume on Jake's NASA ward, thus causing Murray to almost flush it down the toilet. Now you'd think since they built up Jake as this genius kid that he'd recognize this almost immediately, but no, he literally smells the perfume but doesn't put 2 and 2 together until Act 1 is almost over. This movie is already nothing but painful stereotypes and they can't even get that right. Why is it that Julianne and Murray both seem more perceptive and mentally capable than the smart guy? And why even build his character in that way if he was just going to prove to be an idiot during the limited screen time he gets? Savannah proves to be the only viable aspect of Act 1, but she's basically just playing Discount Lily. But even she can't keep a consistent character going. One minute she can't stand Julianne, and the next she's impressed by her ongoing manipulation of a trio of boys. That's called a contradiction. And you might be saying, but wouldn't that cleverly connect back to the fact that frenemies as a term is an inherent contradiction? To which I say, I wish the movie was that smart, but Paul ain't here. And even if they framed it in that way, it doesn't work because Julianne and Savannah barely know each other. So after Act 1 mercifully ends with Murray, of course, coming out of nowhere to destroy Jake's project, we get to the part that people probably remember most about this movie, mainly because it's all about Zendaya and Bella Thorne, once again playing best friends as Haley and Avalon respectfully. They work together on an online magazine called Geekly Chic. Their site is relatively obscure until Cherry St. Clair discovers them, but here's the kicker, she only wants one of them to run the website. Wait, what? How was this only brought up now? Her company talked to both of them on the phone. She saw both of their names on the website. Companies don't do this without having a much better understanding of who they're dealing with. This whole contrived, oh, Haley is so shy and soft-spoken, wouldn't it be so funny if they thought she barely contributed? First off, no. You have barely established these characters. You can't just assume that because Rocky and Cece had a similar dynamic that everyone would automatically assume that it works the same here. And secondly, if that was your thinking, that just might be the laziest, most carbon copy, cookie cutter, didn't even cut the crust off the bread screenwriting I've ever seen. How much longer is this? So the two all of a sudden become frenemies, which all of a sudden causes them to be at each other's necks for a super exclusive interview with a French pop star. And because this waste of a character is present, they can create all kinds of loopholes to make sure that these two never face any real problems. But here's my biggest problems. The writing and humor is atrocious here. Yes, even by Shake It Up standards. The GPS talks in a different language, which somehow keeps this pair from reading literal direction signs. And worst of all, these cell phone conversations have no satellite delay. What is with Zendaya movies and cell phones? Every time she's in a movie with one, the movie becomes broken beyond repair. It's not even her fault really, she's not all that bad here, but nobody on this production team proofread anything that ended up in this movie. So the pop star they're trying to interview ends up not being French at all, and they report that story to Miss St. Clair, who likes it, but still only wants one of them. And then, now stay with me here guys, she unironically chastises Haley and Avalon for being unprofessional. This movie is a freaking joke, but I don't think it's funny in the way they intended. This so-called professional right here, who didn't even know basic information about the duo she was meeting with, sat there looking like discount Sandra Bullock and said, "I'm the professional one here." Pure, unmitigated garbage. And it doesn't even really matter that she got her just desserts in the end, because they set her up here as a cartoon character, not a real boss. It has all the resonance of Bugs Bunny getting one over on Elmer Fudd. And, oh, good lord, there's still a whole third act to go. Okay, the other parts were badly written, built on convenience, and were neither smart nor subtle in the slightest. But the best part of the film to this point has been Savannah. So maybe this third act will be an inspired peek into the psyche of a girl who expresses herself through unconventional gender. Oh, who am I kidding? So the point of Act 3 is that Savannah from before still likes Jake, who is single at the moment. I won't blame you if you forgot, because honestly, I barely remember Act 1 and I'm reviewing it. This leads to her twin showing up out of nowhere. No, I'm not kidding. They somehow thought this was the best way to cap off a movie called Frenemies. They could have potentially created an interesting dispute where Julianne from before is trying to change, at least allegedly, which then gets in between Jake and Savannah, and now Savannah feels pressured into being more of a prototypical girl in an effort to properly express her feelings and have Jake notice her. But no, they settled on this migraine-inducing junk instead. So her twin, named Emma, just so happens to live a life of privilege and fortune, and if you thought Frenemies was going to take a nuanced dive into why her seemingly perfect life ain't so perfect, you're in the wrong neighborhood. Outside of a genuinely solid performance by the butler here, these rich snobs act about as human as the damn Borg. So the twins, or alter egos, or whatever this terrible screenplay thinks they are, meet up. This seems very similar to another bad movie. Hey, wait a minute now. This movie seems to be taking a lot of inspiration from all the wrong places. A dog that doesn't act like a real dog, cell phones that don't work like real cell phones, twins meeting at clothing stores. It's like this movie went out of its way to be bad. So obviously they want to pull a parent trap and switch lives for a little bit because the other has it so good. And somehow neither Emma's parents nor Savannah's family ever notice the obvious ways that their daughters aren't acting like themselves. All it would have taken is a, "Hey, you've been off lately, anything on your mind?" And then maybe, just maybe, we could have salvaged some of this shell of a film by having the parents actually interact with the girls. But no, the pace is so mind-bogglingly quick that sometimes the editing shows a skateboard in one frame only to have it disappear the next. Where did it go? Hopefully where this movie will soon be. So Savannah and Emma become frenemies after Emma asks Jake out. It's framed as Emma doing Savannah a favor, but then they don't even switch back when the date happens. Why? And then, out of nowhere, Emma starts feeling some type of way, and now Savannah is using Lance as a threat. Why? But later we find out that Emma doesn't even like Lance, so in reality, Savannah has no actual control. But since they just needed to manufacture a BS conflict so that the title can at least make the slightest bit of sense, here we are. Wow, is that 3 sighs in one review? I think I'm losing it, guys. So then, everything becomes hunky-dory when Emma's party happens, and even people that weren't invited somehow know about it. Emma breaks up with Lance, Savannah is with Jake now, even though Emma stole away her moment to really come into her own, so this is about as undeserved a romantic finish as it gets. And then, oh boy, and then, what do we end with? Not a cheeky revelation about how sometimes friendships can go south, no proper resolution to the far too many random and dubious plot threads, but a freaking dance. I don't believe what I'm seeing. This movie literally shoehorned in a dance sequence out of freaking nowhere. I repeat, nowhere. Just so it could abide by the ever-timeless but always annoying cliche, every DCOM has its dance. Heaven help me. And I guess heaven listened, because the movie ended right then and there. And now, the characters. The real question here is, are any of the characters good? To which I reply, yes, but also no, and here's why. There are a few passable performances here. Zendaya and Bella play off each other well, as to be expected, which is why Act 2 is arguably the only kind of barely visible silver lining, but it just feels like they dressed up Rocky and Cece in different clothes and sent them on their way. At least in Adventures in Babysitting, Sabrina got to expand her range a bit. We get nothing new from the 2 actors that everyone would have watched anyways. Nick Robinson as Jake has his occasional moment, but I can't get over a guy as smart as him being so dumb. His entire story only works because he's considered brainy, but that's only because pieces of paper and other characters tell us he's smart. He rarely acts smart. Comparing this to the great work done by Ricky Ullman in Pixel Perfect, who also plays a smart guy, would just be cruel. Ricky owns that role, but Nick barely grasps it. Mary Mouser as Savannah and Emma is still the best part of Act 1, but even though she plays a large role in two different parts of the story, they don't really go anywhere or do anything with her character. Her entire thing is skateboards and liking Jake, and even though she acts decently well as Savannah, it's still mostly boring because she's only ever defined by those two traits. And then when she has to play Emma, it gets worse because Emma is even less nuanced and Mary plays Emma so flat and dull that it's impossible to care about anything she goes through. And when they start playing each other, Jesus Christ. Let's just say that Disney Channel learned from their mistakes here by realizing that there's more to being twins than just looking the same. I still have a hard time believing that Maddie isn't being played by Dove's actual twin, and that's all in the details that make both Liv and Maddie feel like completely different people. But here, it's nearly impossible to make that separation because the only thing that makes this pair different are surface level traits that the movie never delves into more deeply. Maybe that's just the limitations of a movie format, but that's not exactly an argument in the favor of Frenemies. If you can't make it work with limited screen time, scrap the 3-act nonsense or just scrap the film in its entirety. And outside of the butler, who has a couple of good scenes, none of the supporting characters are anything more than glorified cameos begrudgingly waltzing on set looking to collect their Disney Channel paychecks. And that's Frenemies, a 3-part nightmare from start to finish that you keep wishing would get better, but the movie inexplicably takes that as a challenge to dive deeper into mediocrity. Paul can save almost anything. He made One World both the smartest and the most beautifully shot entry in the Cheetah trilogy, but I don't even think the legend himself could have salvaged this incoherent nonsense. The writers of this fly-attracting turd that somehow swindled Disney Channel into filming this should be ashamed of themselves. Seriously, the screenplay is so stupid, so cringeworthy, so minimalistic that it should be against the law. And it all starts with this moronic 3-act structure that thinks getting talked at with a damn iPad somehow counts as good transitions. This structure works against the film at every turn, and even forces connective tissue down our throats just to milk more screen time out of the only two actors anyone knows. They have nothing to do with the other two acts, but they just keep finding ways to force fit them in. And worse than that, even as individual parts, the 3-act structure fails because of the simple fact that it's pressed for time. So of course they have to rush through certain things that would have taken at least some time to develop in most other DCOMs. And what you end up with are hollow characters and a scattershot plotline that wouldn't matter even if it actually bothered to make any sense. And speaking of not making sense, why even call this movie Frenemies? I have a theory. They wanted to create a trendy movie with a trendy title, but they forgot one important detail, actually understanding what the hell the term even means. Over the course of the movie, I was never convinced that any of these pairs were frenemies. I felt that they were just friends who got involved in a disagreement, something that happens to friends all the time without a needless label tacked on. And in Act 3, the so-called friends in question barely know each other to start. Being a frenemy is about having a fundamental dislike or rivalry towards someone, despite being allies for the most part. These are frenemies. These are frenemies. Even Dadnap gets the idea right without having to overtly define the Emily Osment Trip Zoom dynamic. But this movie couldn't even be bothered to structure itself around a definition it took me literally 2 freaking seconds to Google. And that's in addition to the mechanics behind tearing these pairs apart being brain dead and inconsistent. Murray is smart enough to knock a phone away, knowing that it could be used to call Jake, but not smart enough to recognize Jake's award that he knows is valuable. This so-called professional businesswoman acts more like a child pretending to be in charge and creates an issue out of left field just because the movie needed a conflict in Act 2. And both conflicts are so easily resolved, which, again, goes back to the inherent limitations and outright stupidity of creating this 3-act structure. And the Emma-Savannah dynamic is literally created out of thin air. 2 characters that just so happen to be twins, just so the movie has another moronic excuse to contrive another moronic plotline to create another pair of frenemies and resolve it in an equally moronic way. I don't believe I'm saying this, guys, but this movie might actually be more pointless than Life is Rough, a bigger waste of talent than Sharpay's Fabulous Adventure, and, dare I say, worse than Twitches? Twitches had a bevy of problems, but you at least had a competent director at the helm, and a few good ideas, but Frenemies has none of that. Every single potentially interesting idea is squandered by either bad writing, bad pacing, or bad directing. The actors actually aren't too bad here, but they're given nothing to work with. Even Savannah's potentially engaging character arc is smashed to pieces by a screenplay that's allergic to quality, and on top of that, this movie commits one of the greatest sins of them all. It has no reason to exist. There's absolutely nothing here that hasn't been done better in the 90+ DCOMs that I'd rank higher than this one. The concept of frenemies is just a shoddy substitute for character conflict, and you can find that anywhere. The idea of drama doesn't need to be the focus of an entire movie, and a poorly conceived idea at that. Even if you did toss out the whole 3-act structure, you've still got nothing but boring copy and paste ideas from other movies, and even if Savannah was more of the focus as a result, you would still have the same bad writers and the same bad director. I swear, I'm trying, guys, I really am, but this movie is giving me nothing to praise. Honestly, as weird as it might sound, the movie's biggest sin might also be its saving grace, because if this movie attempted to matter more and then screwed it up the way Genius did, for example, it would have made for a much worse experience. It's still painfully asinine, but relatively innocuous compared to the worst of the worst, which isn't saying much, but again, this movie doesn't really have much to say either. So calling it relatively inoffensive in this context is probably the best compliment I can muster, outside of the handful of decent acting moments. And, in a weird way, I'm kind of thankful for that, because I'd sooner watch and review every single Fred movie than witness this production team fail miserably at tackling a subject of actual importance. My recommendation is an obvious one, but even so, I will always end on the note that the only way to know for sure is to give it a watch and decide for yourself. That is, if you can make it all the way through. I barely did. But either way, thanks for watching. I've got something very different in mind for the next video, so hopefully you'll all enjoy it. Until then...
We're gonna go find ourselves a bigger and better playground.
Meaning?
I am not sure, but it sounded really good, so we're going out on that.